Good evening. I now call the November 14th, 2019 regular meeting of the Ann Arbor Historic District Commission to order. Ms. Thatcher, will you please call the roll?
Sure. Commissioner Quijano. Here. Commissioner Epperson.
Here.
Commissioner Rockland.
Here.
Commissioner Beeson. Commissioner Hall. Commissioner White. John Beeson is expected, but you do have a quorum.
Okay.
And Commissioner Kathy Fortner.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thatcher. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Ann Arbor Historic District Commission. I'd like to take a moment to explain the order of the meeting, specifically as it relates to the hearing of the application on tonight's agenda. Each case will be called, and we'll first hear the staff presentation and recommendations. Following this, the commissioners who served on the review committee will present their observations and recommendations. At this point, the applicant will have an opportunity to step forward and provide any comments or additional information about the application, and commissioners may ask questions. Once the applicant has finished, members of the public who wish to provide comments on the current case may do so, while please noting the time limit of 3 minutes per person. Everyone who steps forward will need to state their name aloud for the record and sign in at the sheet located on the podium and limit their comments to the application at hand. Following any public comment, the hearing will be closed and the commission will deliberate the application, make a motion, and have a discussion and then vote. If any members of the public would like to speak on general preservation topics and not to any specific application, opportunity is provided during the public commentary following the approval of the agenda. Everyone who would like to address the commission may do so and will be asked to state their name aloud for the record and sign in at the front podium. Thank you so much for coming this evening. Your comments are valuable to the commission. I would now like to introduce the commissioners. Commissioner Quijano on my right. I'm Anna Epperson. We have staff Jill Thatcher, our newest member, Catherine Fortner, and David Rockland. Move on to the item C, approval of the agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or changes to the agenda?
Nothing we need to change, but I just want you to note that under audience participation, we'll also do a quick introduction.
Okay. So, hearing seeing no objection, the agenda is approved as presented. Onto the audience participation. Do we have any members of the public who would like to come forward and speak for the record? No one's coming forward? So, Commissioner Catherine, would you like to introduce yourself, say a few words?
I'm Catherine Fortner, and I came to the Ann Arbor area as an undergraduate a long time ago, in the late 70s, and have worked and lived in Ann Arbor since. About 8 years ago, I did a career change and went back and got my master's degree in historic preservation from Eastern, and worked for 5 years for the State Historic Preservation Office in Ohio. Needed to come back to Michigan for family reasons, and that was another career change, so this is my way of keeping in touch with my preservation activities.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome. All right, and we'll move on to item E, any unfinished business?
No.
Nothing? Okay, and now to the hearings portion. We now move to item F1, HTC 19-203-208 Murray Avenue.
This 1 3/4 story gable fronter is in the Old West Side Historic District. It features a nearly full-width front porch with turned posts, wood-lap siding, a gabled wood dormer on the north elevation, and a textured block foundation. First appears in Polk directories in 1914 as the home of barber Leon Hathaway. The property is located on the west side of Murray Avenue, south of West Washington and north of West Liberty Streets, and the applicant is seeking HDC approval to install a solar array centered on the south-facing roof of the house. Here we are at 208 Murray. This is, for those of you who know Murray Avenue, this is at close to the bottom of the hill. It's got a gabled wall dormer on the north side, but we're mostly interested in this south side because the array of solar panels is proposed to go on this roof surface. You can see that there's really nothing interrupting it except this chimney, red brick chimney in the center on the ridge. View from the street, it's a visible roof, though you wouldn't see as much of it, I don't think, if it weren't covered in snow when we were there on Tuesday. Does kind of call attention to itself. The proposed panels, there are 8 of them, and together they make an area 13 feet 3 inches wide by 11 inches tall. They are the black on black that we always strongly encourage people to propose. And they would be, this is not actually drawn correctly. You're going to have to look in your packet. There was an additional drawing submitted. Yeah, that's it. The panels are centered on the roof. They are about, let's see, they're a foot below the chimney, 3 feet below the roof ridge, and a foot from the eave. So they are centered in the middle of that roof surface. They cover a little bit less than half of the roof, but they're in the middle. The roof material is asphalt, and the work is reversible. There's good documentation of what's going on. There's some shots from inside the attic. There was a healthy crop of icicles on the side. They don't look as bad here, but going over the Secretary of Interior standards that best apply would be numbers 2, 9, and 10. 2 says that the historic character of a property will be retained and preserved. The removal of distinctive materials or alteration of features, spaces, and spatial relationships that characterize a property will be avoided. 9 says that new additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property. The new work shall be differentiated from the old and shall be compatible with the massing, size, scale, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and its environment. Number 10 says new additions and adjacent or related new construction will be undertaken in such a manner that if removed in the future, the essential form and integrity of the historic property will be unimpaired. From the Secretary of the Interior's Guidelines for Roofs, it's recommended to identify, retain, and preserve roofs that are important in defining the overall historic character of the building. Not recommended is changing the configuration of a roof by adding new features, such as dormer windows, vents, or skylights that historic character is diminished. And the guidelines for mechanical systems recommend providing adequate structural support for new mechanical equipment, installing the vertical runs of ducts, pipes, and cables in closets, service rooms, and wall cavities. And from the guidelines for energy efficiency, recommended is placing a new addition that may be necessary to increase energy efficiency on non-character defining elevations. Another guideline for mechanical equipment not recommended is failing to consider the weight and design of new mechanical equipment so that as a result, historic structural members or finished surfaces are weakened or cracked. From the Ann Arbor Historic District Design Guidelines for solar panels, it is appropriate to mount solar panels at grade or on ground pole mountings. In the absence of an appropriate ground-based mounting location, panels should be mounted on side or rear-facing roof surfaces. It's appropriate to install mechanical and surface equipment on the roof related to the solar units and their related devices that they are inconspicuous from the public right-of-way and do not damage or obscure character-defining features. There's a lot of information in the packet that I did not put in the slideshow, just because it's not very conducive to looking at on a screen. But staff does believe that the materials and design of the panels are compatible with the existing structure, neighboring buildings, and the surrounding historic district. They don't call undue attention to themselves. They're not too big or too small. They're just a cohesive group in the middle of a roof, and believes that they meet the Secretary of Interior standards and the Ann Arbor Historic District Design Guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thatcher. Commissioners Beeson and White were on the review committee. Commissioner Beeson, will you please give us your report and recommendation?
Sure. Wow, okay. So typical Old West Side home and solar panels facing the sun, which is great. And from the street, this is pretty much the only time that you'd be able to see them on this portion of the street. Walking on the sidewalk, pretty tough to see them by and large. All the houses on this street, as you may remember, are all pretty tight and close together. Again, this is normally an issue of can it be removed or changed, and it's one of those cases again. But by and large, we can stand across the street and not see it very easily, unless you're standing specifically right in the middle of the street at this particular view that Jill captured perfectly.
Thank you.
That's
All right, would the applicant please come forward, provide your name for the record, and please sign in if you have anything to add to the staff report or review committee.
No, they're not here.
Not here. Okay. no questions for the applicant?
They're not here?
No,
They're not here. Just gotta move down the list. So, would any of the commissioners like to make a motion on the application?
Did you ask if anybody else wanted to speak on this?
Oh, no, I did not. I can back up 1 second before that. Would there any,
Are there any members of the public?
are there any members of the public who would like to speak on the topic on this agenda item?
Okay.
Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public comment portion. Now, would any commissioners like to make a motion on the application? Commissioner Rock?
I would love to, thank you. I move that the commission issue a certificate of appropriateness for the application at 208 Murray Avenue, a contributing property in the Old West Side Historic District, to install a black-on-black solar array centered on the south-facing roof as proposed. The work is compatible in exterior design, arrangement, texture, material, and relationship to the rest of the building and the surrounding area, and meets the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation and guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings. In particular, standards 2, 9, and 10, and the guidelines for roofs, energy efficiency, and mechanical systems, as well as the Ann Arbor Historic District design guidelines, particularly as they pertain to solar installations.
Support.
Moved by Commissioner Rockland, seconded by Commissioner Quijano. Is there a discussion on the motion?
I guess I just have one question for Commissioner Beeson, who's there on site. I had a question for those that were on site. We had looked at some solar panels a month or so ago, and we were a little bit concerned about the wiring and how all of that would be routed. Any concerns here?
We did not meet with the installer on site, so we didn't have a chance to ask where the wiring was going to be going. And on these drawings, I can't exactly tell either. So that's a good question. Something we don't have answered. Did you say that's accurate, Joe?
It was the same contractor that didn't give
Yeah.
you that information last time, that didn't give it
Oh,
to you
was
this
it?
time. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, they, with this sort of mount, they might go right through the ridge vent and then come back through. It's one of the easiest ways to do it, or up through the chimney if the chimney is abandoned, but we don't know. It's not on the drawings, and they weren't there when we asked them.
Okay.
The other question I had too was all the structural concerns, because they did show some good interior drawings of the framing, 2x4s and 24 inches on center, which is not very structurally framed, but they also went through the structural permit calculation for the expedited solar permit review. So that seems to say that it's probably okay if they went through that already, so that's out of our concern.
Assuming someone verifies those
Assuming
numbers.
someone verified it, but it does
'Cause
seem,
I was wondering about some of those, but I do think that's
Yeah.
maybe someone else's issue, yeah.
I think it is.
I was wondering about the placement of the solar panels. I mean, typically, well, one thing to do would be to fill the entire roof as much as you can with solar panels. That's not the case here. Like on this sort of rectangular shaped roof, it's a smaller rectangle than the roof, and it's centered. Is there an insulation reason for the centering, or is it, I think from a historic preservation standpoint, I would prefer it as far back as possible. But maybe there's a big tree on the west side or something, so they want to nudge it up a little. Do you recall anything blocking?
Yeah, I do recall
In one of
it.
the photos, I saw some branches there.
I
that
looked down
maybe
the,
was-
oh, here we go.
Yeah.
So I did look down and look at some trees. So depending on the time of year, yeah, there might be a little bit of shading on one of those trees. But, yeah, I mean, I remember looking down this aisle, like pushing yourself in between the houses a little bit more and looking straight down, and I do remember seeing a taller tree back there. So that might be the reason why they moved it to the middle instead of the back. But it could also be that they're going to expand on the system. And normally when you want to expand on the system, you do push it off to one side or the other.
Right.
Because you need them all wired separately, but
Yeah. So that's two good reasons to push it to the back. But
Yeah.
then if there's one better reason, that's
Shade.
because there's
yeah, and the tree,
a tree.
that might be on someone else's property that they can't take down
Yeah.
easily.
It's a shame the applicant's not here.
I know, it would be nice if they came.
My checklist for solar installations is getting longer by the minute.
It is, this is, Good thing.
Are there other do you have another photo? Maybe we can see that, like that one right there.
Oh, yeah.
That
yeah,
tree
Oh, yeah.
there's the big tree.
is maybe the reason to center it.
Yeah.
Okay. I have no further discussion.
No further. We can move on to the motion portion, or voting, I should say. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Yeah, aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The motion does carry. Your application has been approved, and you will receive a written notice from staff. Please note that you must apply for any required permits from the city before beginning on your project. On to the next hearing, F2, 311 South Main Street.
This is in the Main Street Historic District, and it's a two-story brick building in the commercial vernacular style. It was completed in 1928, and the first tenant was Mulig and Lamphere Hardware in 1930. Features 1/1 windows, stone trim, and tapestry brick. Sites on the east side of South Main Street, north of East William, and south of East Liberty Streets. And the applicant is seeking HCC approval to install a pedestrian scale bracket sign on the front facade. Sign would go right up here. You see that there's an electrical box right here, electrical service. And the sign, you'll see in a minute, is just sort of below it. We haven't had many applications on this storefront in a number of years. It's another shot of it. So many ways to look at brick. If you look down the street, there are a couple of smaller projecting signs. Shalimar, which is a little bigger than we'd probably allow today, and 10,000 Villages, which is right where it should be. And then on the corner, there's the big pocket watch for Shinola. That was a whole different case. It's got sign variances and other things. And look at the height. It's just above, or just at these sign bands. And that is compatible with Jolly Pumpkin sign. You know, none of these buildings are exactly perfectly level with each other. But then looking south, we just get down to the canopy on the new building next door at 315 South Main, and then the larger one, the copper canopy. Oop, there's a better picture. And no real pedestrian scale signs down there, except for the ones that really don't meet code, that are really historic. Proposal, Jolly Pumpkin, it's on 2 brackets. Lights are contained underneath the bracket. It's about 4 feet tall, the bracket. The sign perfectly meets the pedestrian sign guidelines for size. I believe it's 4.5 square feet on a side. There's the existing and there's the proposed. So the size is appropriate, the height is appropriate, the materials. The Secretary of Interior Standards, number 1, says a property will be used as it was historically or given a new use that requires minimal change to its distinctive materials, features, spaces, and spatial relationships. I don't believe this sign negatively impacts any of those things. And I've read 2 and 9 and 10 to you already. From the guidelines for storefronts, not recommended is introducing a new design that's incompatible, or using inappropriately scaled signs and logos or other types of signs that obscure, damage, or destroy character-defining features of the historic building, or using new illuminated signs. We do allow illuminated signs as long as they are externally illuminated. So when we clean up the design guidelines, we should probably put the word internal in this guideline. Oh, wait, we can't. That's the Secretary of Interior. We can put it in ours, though. The Ann Arbor Historic District Design Guidelines for Signs say it's appropriate to attach signage through masonry joints or through materials that can be easily repaired, such as wood, when signage is removed. They did specify on the application, on the drawings, that it would be mounted in mortar joints. And it's appropriate to install signage that's compatible in size, style, material, and appearance to the historic resource and district, to place signs to align with others along the commercial block face, and to install signage that's subordinate to the overall building composition. And then, drilling down even farther, pedestrian scale signs are appropriate to locate near the business's entry, at least 8 feet from the ground on the first floor, and to mount pedestrian scale signs on an arm or arms or hanging from a bracket and aligning them with similar signs on the block, and they should not exceed 4.5 square feet per side. So staff does believe that The sign's appropriate and meets the Ann Arbor Historic District Design Guidelines and the Secretary of Interior standards and guidelines. Thank you.
Commissioner Beeson, will you please give us your report?
Sure. Ms. Thatcher already pretty much marched us down through the other signs on the block, but that should be duly noted, I guess. An important feature to think about. So when you look the other direction, we have a brand-new building. Do you have any photos of that other direction? Yep. So we have a brand-new building right next to it with similar banding and the sign band above. So this, can you go to the photo that shows the electrical outlet? That one. So there you can kind of see how things are aligning and where the sign would be in conjunction with the adjacent building, as well as how it might march itself down the sidewalks. Trying to think of any particular things to note. That light fixture will definitely kind of where they mount it in terms of its elevation. That light fixture to the right in that photo will probably
This guy.
do something with it. That's also a light fixture I'm not too fond of because it shines straight up too. It's an up and down. So I'm not sure what else to say on that, but I think I'm done. That's good.
Thank you.
Sure.
Would the applicant please come forward, provide your name for the record, and please sign it?
My name is Kevin Short with Johnson Sign Company.
Thank you.
And, yeah, the sign is conforming to the city code and HGC code, so.
Okay.
And if you have any
Anything further to
questions-
add to the reporter?
No.
Okay. Thank you. You may,
Got a question
commissioners,
for-
do you have any questions for
Sure.
the applicant?
Can you explain just a quick description of the lighting, the illumination of the sign? Staff
Well,
mentioned
the
it
brackets are
briefly.
open channel where they'll be recessed underneath, and they shine downwards.
Like a little LED strip hidden in the
Correct,
bracket?
right.
Thank you.
Very concealed.
Yeah.
And the bracket sort of shows how it's being mounted, but I'm guessing it's at the mortar joints? I mean, I could,
Yes.
yeah, sort of tell. Can you see that?
Yeah, we wrote on the drawing that it'll be mortar joints only.
Yeah, we saw in the narrative, but, yeah. 4-inch expansion joints that are aligned to the mortar joints.
Just had a question. It calls out that the new sign is to use a existing circuit and switch, and there's some conduit that looks like it runs.
Yeah, there's a junction box that will be,
Okay. The
Tapping
conduit
into.
that's there, will that be removed? It looks like it runs down in between where the sign's going.
yeah, it'll be,
Or cut back.
yeah, like into the sign, then it'll be, yeah, looped into it.
Okay.
Is there a change in brick elevation? Does this span? Oh, there we go. Thank you. No, it does not look like there's a change in brick reveal. Doesn't recess or anything.
No.
Okay.
Any other?
Is that the light that we're looking at down low, is that, do you know if that's staying? I guess-
Oh, the one that's very low, yeah, that's,
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. You may be seated.
thank you.
Moving on to the public hearing, are there any members of the public who would like to speak on this agenda item? Seeing none, I will close the public portion of the application. Applicant may be seated. Would any commissioner like to make a motion on this application?
I move that the commission issue a certificate of appropriateness for the application at 311 South Main Street, a contributing property in the Main Street Historic District, to install a pedestrian scale sign on the front facade as proposed. The work is compatible in exterior design, arrangement, texture, material, and relationship to the rest of the building and the surrounding area, and meets the Ann Arbor Historic District Design Guidelines for signs, and the Secretary of the Interior's standards for rehabilitation, and the guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings, in particular standards 1, 2, 9, and 10, and the guidelines for storefronts.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Quijano, seconded by Commissioner Beeson. Is there a discussion on the motion?
This meets the guidelines.
Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward and meets the guidelines.
I like the hidden lighting system.
Yes,
It's nice.
that is nice. It is- The attachment is directly or in close proximity to
Yeah.
Yeah.
the light.
It'd be nice to have that sign. I think I always walk past that.
Yeah, yes.
Storefront, so-
Yeah.
So
Well, I kind of feel like they're joining the bandwagon of everyone else putting their band signs in, so.
So we can move to the vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay. The motion does carry. Your application has been approved, and you will receive a written notice from staff. Please note that you must apply for any required permits from the city before beginning your project.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks.
Now on to item F3. 1003 West Liberty Street. Ms. Thatcher, will you please give the staff report?
We're back in the Old West Side Historic District. This one-story craftsman bungalow that I learned tonight is an Aladdin home. Features a low-slung side gabled roof, 6 and 12/1 windows, and a street-facing shed roof dormer with 2 small rectangular windows. The full-width front porch features heavy, square wood half columns above a parged deck and foundation, with simple wood guardrails and parged wing walls flanking concrete front steps. First appears in Polk City directories in 1913, and the first occupant was Mrs. H.S. Russell, a writer. Currently has wide aluminum siding covering, we're not sure what underneath. The site is located on the south side of West Liberty, west of 8th Street and east of Eberwhite Boulevard. And the applicant is seeking HDC approval to replace 2 original 6/1 windows with 2 casement windows that have applied muntins and spacers to simulate a 6/1 window. So the 2 windows in question don't meet egress for bedrooms, and right now both are in 1 bedroom, and you'll see from the floor plan in a minute that it's one like double-sized bedroom. And in order to put it to 2 bedrooms, then both of the windows are being, both of the rooms are being touched, the new resulting rooms, so both have to meet egress requirements. The 2 most obvious ways to do this would be to either replace the existing windows or to cut new window openings and install new windows in them that meet egress. Or to not combine the 2 bedrooms and just have 1 oversized bedroom. This is one of the windows here. It's the second window on the side of the house. I've just hopped the fence and I'm standing on the sidewalk. There it is from in front of the neighbor's house. That's about as best you can see it, with the big pine tree that's pretty much usually in the way. These 2 photos were the clearest shots that I could get of it from the sidewalk. The other window, oh, this is the first one. You can see it's 6/1 divided. It matches the other windows on the house. It does have weights and pulleys, so it is a pre-1945 window, so it contributes to the historic character of the house. And this back wing on the house is a later addition. It does not show up on the 1947 aerial photos. So this is what we'd consider to be a modern addition, and it has a bunch of vinyl windows on the other side. But we believe that this window, which seems to match nearly exactly the one that we were just looking at on the side, was probably pulled off the back wall of the house and installed here to save some money when they built the addition. And that's that window. The owners recently purchased the property over the summer and had hand-built new wood storm windows in appropriate fashion to, in lieu of putting in aluminum storms, which also would have been approvable, but not nearly as historically accurate, so that's appreciated. So existing floor plan on the left. If you pretend let's see, let's see, what's the front and what's the back? Family room, dining room. So this is the
Top.
front.
Top is front.
Top is front?
Yep.
Yeah, top is front. So if you imagine that none of this were here, the original house is just this near square. and there would have been a bedroom on the right and a kitchen on the left, and then another bedroom in the middle here. There's something wrong with this drawing, and maybe Brad or Brian can tell me in a minute, but this isn't showing that internal buried bedroom. I think I cut and pasted the wrong drawing.
The wall is
The wall
here,
going-
it's just not showing up on your screen.
Oh, it's there? I just can't see. Oh, I see, where it says bedroom 2 here. Got it. So there is an internal buried bedroom. And this is either right here or right here is probably where that window came from. So now they'd like to split the double-length bedroom into 2, which makes a lot of sense. This was the original bedroom, this is the addition on the back of the house. Put in bathrooms all over the place, and just rearrange things to make it a little bit more logical. I don't think a whole lot of thought was given to this floor plan. If you really study it, it's kind of crazy. So anyway, here's one of the windows, here's the other location of the windows that they need to do something about. The proposed replacement window is custom, I believe it's a Marvin, it is all wood. It does have applied interior and exterior muttons and spacers in between, and an applied meeting rail in the middle. No one's going to mistake it for an authentic 6/1 double hung window, but when you're looking at it from the street, no one's also going to really suspect that it's not a 6/1 double hung window, in my opinion. The contractor has taken some care to fill out a window worksheet. It's not really required, but it's great that he's pretty close in most of these dimensions to the original. You know, it varies very slightly, which is to be expected, but he's done a great job of finding a window that's as compatible as can be, given that it's a casement, not a double hung. There are details, drawings of the different profiles in the packet. See the divided light and the divided, the simulated meeting rail. And there are a couple in your packet, photos of the interior. Here's the one on the back of the house, I believe. Yeah, you can see the sloping roof coming down. And this is in the same room. Here's the one on the side wall. So the Secretary of Interior standards that best apply are 2, 9, and 10, all of which I've read to you. From the guidelines for windows, not recommended is introducing a new design that's incompatible with the historic character of the building. From district or neighborhood setting, not recommended is introducing new construction that's visually incompatible or that destroys historic relationships within the setting. From the guidelines for health and safety, it's recommended to identify the historic building's character-defining features, spaces, and finishes so that code-required work will not result in their damage or loss. Also complying with health and safety codes in such a manner that character-defining spaces, features, and finishes are preserved. From the guidelines for health and safety, it's not recommended to alter, damage, or destroy character-defining spaces, features, and finishes while making modifications to comply with safety codes. I think that said the same thing the other direction. Not recommended is removing or radically changing buildings and their features or site features which are important in defining the overall historic character of the buildings, that as a result the character is diminished. From the Ann Arbor Historic District Design Guidelines for windows, not appropriate is changing the number, location, and size or glazing pattern by cutting new openings, blocking in, or installing replacement sash which does not fit the historic opening. Also from safety codes, not appropriate is altering, damaging, or destroying character-defining spaces, features, and finishes. All right, let me check my notes here a minute. I did confirm with the building department that there's no way to make the existing windows meet code for egress. They're just not big enough. What you want to consider this window on the back is up to you. It's historic material, but it's been relocated. It's not in the same place anymore, which I certainly think makes it lose a lot of its historic integrity, but it's probably still an Aladdin window that came with the house. So that's a little bit strange. But overall, staff believes that the work is compatible with the existing structure and neighborhood buildings and the surrounding historic district and meets the Secretary of Interior standards and guidelines. I think if these windows were more visible or closer to the street or something like that, or the last two remaining 6/1 windows in the house. Those might be different circumstances, but as they stand, I don't consider this to be a historic location. It's kind of not conjectural, that's not quite the right word, but this one I'm more concerned about because you can actually see it. But I do think that redoing the floor plan and making it workable from this sort of bizarre layout that it has now is an appropriate way to live in a house in lieu of putting on another addition on the back in order to get more bedrooms, in order to, have more space, make it more livable. So staff does recommend approval of the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thatcher. Commissioner Beeson, please give us your report.
So, yes, we stared at the windows at length. We definitely believe that the window in the back was moved. All the details are the same as the side window. It even has very similar window, what are those things called, where you put in the little window with a little metal and hold the glazing in place, the stopper, whatever it's called. The putty is certainly gone. That stuff is always expected to degrade over time, but it has the same pulleys as well with the ropes and the weight wells. Even the sashes and how all that stuff meets, all the same. So the new storm windows they look fantastic. They are screwed in right now, just a little different than most storm windows. Normally they're attached on, so you can remove them for the summer and apply some really cool weather aspects. But these windows in particular, as Ms. Thatcher noted, they're on a side elevation and a rear elevation, so they probably wouldn't be seen as much. And there are existing windows on the house themselves that are certainly character-defining features. So when we get to the discussion part, I can add some other overlay, but trying to make sure I hit everything on the site issues. Yeah, so this house is also located on Liberty, so it's a pretty busy street. This house right now blends in because it's got that aluminum siding and some monotone colors. So, as work is getting done on this, I'm sure it'll start standing out a lot more.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Would the applicant please come forward, provide your name for the record, and please sign in?
I am Brad Hinkson Design Build. I would be the contractor.
And I'm Brian Sadek, one of the homeowners, along with my wife, Tiffany Sadek.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add to the staff report or review committee report?
Do you mind if I go ahead?
Regarding what John said, no. I think everything that's been said is adequate.
Okay.
If I could add some context, we've been trying to do the right thing since we purchased this house. As Jill mentioned, the storms are hand-built wood. Because we plan to replace the aluminum, we plan to add later on the little fixtures to keep the storm windows in place. But these windows were originally part of the scope of the hand-built window renovation rather than replacement that we're doing for those original wood windows. But unfortunately, when this egress issue came up, we had to remove it from the renovation scope. There's number of 12/1s in the front elevation and also in the very front of the two side elevations. Those we still are going to renovate rather than replace. We have 2 young kids. You may have seen a bassinet. So lead is a concern for us, but we also want to renovate rather than replace. In this instance, we pretty much have to replace because of the egress issue, and I believe the requirement's 5 square feet. One thing that I'd also point out why this one is important to us, and we hope that you'd pass the motion, is even under the current floor plan, we currently fail the egress requirement because both of those windows are off of what you might call the master hallway bedroom. It's really long and weird. So we already have an egress issue there, and then we also have that sort of embedded room where our 2-year-old is in the middle of the house. So we have some serious safety concerns. We would much rather just renovate these windows, but when we had to go around with the building department over the safety issue, this was the compromise solution we came up with, and we hope you'll consider that we're using wood rather than fiberglass or vinyl or some other material to try and be appropriate on space. So, thank you.
Thank you. Don't forget to sign in, please.
Oh, thank you.
And commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant? Mr. Rocco?
You can sign in.
I can still hear if you want to go.
The storms look really nice, and I'm guessing that on the new, if they're Marvin windows, you won't need a wood storm. And I'm wondering, have you chosen a color for the aluminum cladding? Because I'm trying to picture, can you match the
Yeah.
red with the cladding, or what's the strategy there? Because,
Strategy is because the replacement windows are so close in dimension,
yeah,
is to reuse the two new storms.
okay,
Because, when John and Bob were out there and Jill, the casing of the window, because everything is covered with aluminum, you can't see. But in terms of the width, height of the new casement window, I believe we'll be able to reuse these storms once that detail is replicated. That's currently there, that's all wrapped in aluminum.
how will you operate the window? Casements swing out, correct? So,
Correct.
Yeah.
So, they would only have those on in the winter, when the window's not going to be opened. Me personally, I think the storm windows should not be screwed in from a safety standpoint, because now you have to, break the window and try to go out through, one of those lights. And so, we haven't talked about that, but I think that storm should be, should have the ability to come out more easily in the event of an emergency. And then in the summer, we could even look at, how we can make it work in conjunction with the casement.
so you'll match the color of the new windows to the color of your existing actual operating double-hung windows, not the storms,
That's
will- I
correct.
mean,
Because they'll be wood windows,
Yeah.
they'll be painted,
Right. Okay.
albeit not all the failing paint that's on the existing windows now.
Actually, to clarify, if possible, we would like to match the sashes of the new windows to the storms. The guidance that we got, we're actually working, you asked about colors. We're working with a historical color consultant out of Cambridge, Massachusetts. And we found that the sashes and then the storms should generally be a darker color, while the surrounding area of the window should be a lighter color, which causes additional depth there. So ideally, if it can be done with those Marvin windows, we'd like to have darker sashes to match the darker storms, to comply with that general concept of the interior part being darker. And we found that dark green, that dark red, that's Benjamin Moore's historic cottage red. But a lot of dark greens, dark reds tend to be common for sashes, of that era. So that's our ultimate goal. But we hadn't talked about that color issue of the new windows yet, so.
Only because my component of this project is the, complete gut of the interior and redoing that.
Yeah. So.
Any other questions? Thank you. Moving on to the public hearing, are there any members of the public who would like to speak on this agenda item? Seeing none, I will now close the public hearing portion of the application. Applicant may be seated. Would any commissioner like to make a motion on the application? Commissioner Beeson?
Sure. I move that the commission issue a certificate of appropriateness for the application at 1003 West Liberty Street, a contributing property in the Old West Side Historic District, to replace two windows with a casement window as proposed. The work is compatible in exterior design, arrangement, texture, material, and relationship to the rest of the building and the surrounding area, and meets the Secretary of Interior's standards for rehabilitation and guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings, in particular standards 2, 9, and 10, and the guidelines for windows, district and neighborhood setting, health and safety, and building site, as well as the Ann Arbor Historic District design guidelines, particularly as it pertains to windows and safety codes.
Moved by Commissioner Beeson, seconded by Commissioner Quijano. Is there a discussion on the motion?
I have some questions to clarify. So this is for Jill. You wrote in here that they propose to rearrange the interior to make 3 usable bedrooms, but touching these rooms triggers the requirement for egress windows. So this is really because they're closing off and making new bedroom spaces. Code official says, hey, you need to make sure you have egress. If the walls were not moving, then the windows would stay in place. And
Correct.
if those walls were there to begin with,
Yep,
we
Yeah.
would be looking at a non-issue here.
yes.
Yeah, so to me, I just want to make that clear for all the members at home, the historic people really concerned about keeping historic fabric. Like, to me, initially, I'd be like, no, we're not going to replace these windows. But being as it is, being triggered for a requirement for egress, then it's like, all right, fine, I'll let these windows go. To me, they were still in relatively good condition. You know, they looked like they could, you know, be repaired, and they were probably in better shape than my windows when I moved into my house, so. But, yeah, and they've got nice new storms on it. So the care at which the rest of this is being done, you know, it makes it understood that we're trying to move towards to making this house as livable as possible for the years to come. And in lieu of putting on a giant addition, I think, you know, this is a good way to go, too.
I think also there's the option, you know, they're trying to provide a custom window that fits within the existing opening instead of expanding it. Or
Yep, yeah.
changing that, the sizing of it, plus they're on, two, especially one of them is on inconspicuous facade, so I think that helps. Even though we would like to see, you know, as much of the historic fabric retained as possible, I think it makes a lot of sense in this case.
Yeah, so to a large extent, they're complying with all the Secretary of Interior
Right.
guidelines and meeting the health and safety one, even though they're hitting the one that says not recommended. They're doing the basic minimum that they can do while still trying to get the safety underlined, so.
I agree with all the comments I've heard so far. I will mention, since Commissioner Hall's not here, he normally likes to say that if you could, if it's possible, you should consider saving the windows that you remove from the house and stash them in the garage or something like that. And who knows when those might be, you know, useful in the future. That's always appreciated if you do that. And then I was wondering, what is an Aladdin home? I assume it's like a Sears home or something,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yep, exactly. It's like a Sears home. There's Aladdin out of Bay City. There are Lustron houses in Ann Arbor.
Yeah.
I'll tell you about them at a retreat someday. I just found a paper I wrote on it, really cool.
They're assembled on
They're all
site, like,
metal.
they're not modular, they
They're-
come in pieces like the Sears home or something?
Lustrons were modular, but
Okay.
they're all metal, the whole thing, the
Okay.
walls, the doors, the roof.
Thank you.
It's like a big lunchbox.
Made outside Columbus.
Any other discussion? Okay. Move to vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The motion does carry. Your application has been approved, and you will receive written notice from staff. Please note that you must apply for any required permits from the city before beginning your project. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good luck.
Now, moving on to item G, new business.
None.
None? All right. On to approval of the minutes. Are there any additions, solutions, or amendments to the minutes?
There's one set of minutes that arrived on your seats today. You can take a minute to go through it, or you can let me know if you see anything that jumps out at you.
I have a question, a procedural question, I guess. I think we postponed a project last month, and then the project didn't show up on the agenda this month, so just remind me procedurally what
It was
happens there?
withdrawn by the owner.
It was withdrawn by the
Yeah,
owner?
yeah, so the
And so
project
therefore,
is
that is
closed.
closed, and then if they wanted to propose something, they would open a new hearing?
Yep,
Okay.
they would reapply with a new application, yeah, yep, yep.
Any comments? Okay. All those in favor of approving the minutes as presented, please say aye.
Yes?
Yes.
Aye?
Please
Which
say,
one?
it says aye. Please say yes.
Yes.
All those opposed, please say no. Reading the script here.
Yeah, it does throw you off a little bit.
Whatever you
Hey,
want me to say,
got it.
Commissioner.
I'll get the hang of it. All right. Moving on, reports from commissioners. Do any of the commissioners have any reports to present?
The Cobblestone Farm meeting was canceled on Monday due
Oh.
to snow.
Right.
They have rescheduled for next Monday. I cannot attend. And I don't think I'm going to be able to attend December either.
We support you, Jess.
So kind of sad. I don't want them to think they're forgotten, but I'm always
That's all you can do.
Do you have anything you want me to relay to them? I'm sure that the holiday planning is full swing.
I just actually had a question. There was the Center of the City Task Force meeting. Did that take place? I think Commissioner White.
I believe it took
Someone gonna go?
place. I don't believe
Did any
anyone
of us?
attended.
Okay.
No.
They were going to reschedule at some point.
They were going to have another meeting, but they haven't told us when.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't hear anything about it.
All right. Moving on to assignments. We have volunteers for Tuesday, December 9th for the December 12th regular meeting.
Monday, December 9th.
Monday.
It says Tuesday.
Sorry.
You're reading the script.
I am reading the
Yeah.
script. It's messing me up.
I am not available
Monday.
for that, Jill. I can't do it.
Dave and Kathy are not available.
I will be doing field work on Mackinac Island.
You're not available.
I can do it.
Yeah, I can do it. John, you in?
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't have my phone with me, so I will need a reminder.
Okay, okay. Thank you both.
No
Um,
phone?
I know.
John, I
Off
like
grid.
having you along in the winter because he pushed Bob White and I out of a snowbank on Murray Street on Tuesday, which was
push the car.
very helpful. Much appreciated.
Good they bring a small car.
Moving on, reports from staff.
I've got a couple things. Staff activities is in your packet. If anyone has any questions about anything on it, feel free to ask. I can't recall anything weird happening this month. People were still installing air conditioning units right up to last week.
Oh, it was nice. Until last week.
Yeah, yeah.
For energy grid.
There's one, HCC 19201, that's the Detroit Filling Station, also known as Argyros. When they got a staff approval to replace their canopy a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And when they did that, they installed roll-down vinyl windows that you don't ever see in the summer because they're rolled up and tucked away. But apparently that wasn't part of the scope of their building permit. So building made them come back. And I gave them an HTC staff approval for the work so that they could move forward with their building permit.
And that's the one that's quite hard to see the resource to begin with.
Yeah.
Because it's wrapped
Yeah,
around with new
right,
stuff.
right, that's a,
Yeah.
yeah,
Just a roof.
yeah. So let me know if you have any other questions about that. I've got a couple other things. Last month, we talked about the 2020 policy agenda recommendations for city council. I have not worked on that. I've added it to our winter retreat agenda because I think it deserves 15 or 20 minutes instead of me just sort of saying things that I've already told them through resolutions that you've, passed and things like that. So we'll get to it for next year. I saw no point, there wasn't anything burning that we really had to get on it this year. So we'll be a little more thoughtful about it next time. There's a city lighting ordinance that is in the works. I'm working on it right now for the planning commission. And it's kind of new to me, but you guys I'll bring it to you at some point because it may or may not have ramifications for historic light fixtures. If you know of any historic light fixtures on buildings in districts, let me know, or buildings out of district that you think are really important. Because we've got to kind of figure out a workaround for some things like that we want to be allowed to stay on buildings rather than necessarily have to be replaced. And then last, small cell antennas, I talked to you last month a little bit. That's cooled down a little, so we haven't met and done work on it yet, pun intended. So when we get going on that again, I'll report back to you guys. That's it for staff.
Any concerns of commissioners?
It's great to have a new commissioner on board.
Yeah, it was good.
You're here.
Various communications?
Nope.
HTC, nothing on here?
Nope.
All right. What do we say for this adjournment?
Say the meeting is adjourned. Hit the gavel.
I think that was record.
Meeting is adjourned.
I think that's record.
We didn't put that on there. There being no further
There
business
being
or
no further
something?
business.